so we have some caffeine, this is good. I'm going to talk to you now about a more local problem that we have in the area where I live, which is looking into a unique and troublesome invader in the UK, so a species which has recently appeared. So I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of an introduction and tell you about the different scientific approaches we are taking to try and understand this particular species. The results that we have so far, just a little taste of them, and then the next steps in life history analysis which we'll be doing, including the work which I'm here doing in St. Petersburg, so I'll hopefully tell you a little bit about the reason I'm here in the first place. So, first of all, what are non-native and invasive species and what kind of problems can they cause? So, non-native or invasive species, these are also sometimes called alien species. So these are species which are not naturally from an area. They have been brought from somewhere else, usually by human action. So they have come on a boat, or they have come accidentally on some shellfish or something, and they have established a new home in an area which is not part of their natural distribution. And I just have a couple of examples of the common ones which are problems for us in the UK, to which I like a Bryozoan quite a lot because it's ugly and it actually looks like an alien. And the other one which we have, which is one which we are very worried about, which is a sea squirt called Diademnum vexillum, which is the carpet sea squirt. So, oh sorry, I should say the difference between non-native and invasive species. So, we use these two terms because, a non-native species means that it is not from this area, but it is not necessarily doing any harm. It is not necessarily causing any problem. It is just something that has come from somewhere else and has established a new home. An invasive species means that it is actually causing a problem where it is. It is either killing the local environment or it is causing a problem to the industry and economy in the region. So they're quite different terms within our laws within the UK, and so we have to be a bit careful about when we use each of the different terms. So what I'm talking about here is a non-native species, but we may very soon be reclassifying it to an invasive species. We are at the moment looking at doing that. Okay, so what kind of problems can they cause? Well, there's a mixture of effects that they can have. The first is, of course, biological and ecological, and as scientists, that's often what we are most interested in, that they will come into a new area, and usually because they don't have predators, or they are in an area which is a more welcoming environment for them, they thrive and they may kill off other animals that are there. And so the natural animals can be dominated and suffer. And then the second, which is one of the main drivers for our science at the moment, are the commercial and economical problems. And particularly, there are a lot of problems caused by fouling organisms that grow on the outside of artificial structures in the sea, and especially invasive species. So this is not a nice picture of fouling, but yeah, you can see here the kind of problems which you can get underneath boats. With this is Diademnum vexillum, which is the carpet sea squirt, which we have a lot of problems with, starting to come into the UK. So it means that the boats don't run so well. They use a lot more oil, a lot more power to travel the same distance. They also spread this wherever they go, so they take it with them. So they are spreading it further. And of course it's not just boats, but this also happens on other kinds of structures in the sea as well. Very important within Scotland is we have a lot of aquaculture or farming in the sea. So we grow mussels. This is one of our big exports. And it's a real problem if you get invasive species and fouling, because it can smother and kill the mussels. These ones are quite clean, but it can be a problem. We also have a lot of fish farms with finfish in the sea, so fish like salmon. And these nets, these cages, can get very, very covered in fouling, and it can be a problem for the health of the fish inside the cages, because they start to eat this invasive species, and it's not good. And then this map is just to tell you a little bit about the area where I am based, and to tell you about a very specific problem which we have. So my institute is right up here. This is the very, very northern tip of Scotland. I showed you a map before with the Orkney Islands, and these are the Orkney Islands here. So I'm based here at the very northern tip. And one big area for development at the moment where we are is renewable energy. So getting electricity from wave power and from tidal power. And this is a really big area for investment at the moment. We have many, many different devices in the sea being tested, and we have many lease sites, so sites that have already been rented to companies which are developing them for extracting wave and tidal energy. So all of these areas on here, these are all lease sites which have already been are already in development for extraction of wave and tidal power. So there are very many of them. Most of them are still at the experimental phase, but they the first real phase, if you like, is being installed this year and in here. And it is going to be, I think, 100 tidal turbines at the bottom of the sea. So these are very big developments. It's many, many billions of pounds worth of investment in this area. And this is something which is, they are very concerned about fouling and about invasive species. So the kinds of, so the species which I'm talking about is, again, a bryozoan, because I love bryozoans, I'm sorry. It's called Schizoprella japonica, and like the name suggests, it has come from Japan. I first found it in the UK in May 2011, and it looks like this. It's all of this orange stuff. So this is the bottom of a ladder in a marina where yachts are held, small boats, and it is very covered in this bryozoan. We've since found it in 25 marinas in Europe. Most of these are in Scotland, and most of these are in the north of Scotland, so 21 out of the 25. And these are the first records for this bryozoan in Europe. So this is not a complete map at the moment. We have a few more sites, but it shows the main areas where we have found it in the UK, in Scotland. So it's on all of the different coasts and also on the outlying islands. We have now also since found it on this island and a few more places along this coast.
And where else in Europe have they been found?
Norway. So we have just found it at 3 places in Norway, very early stages, and also in 1 place in England and 1 place in Wales. And at the moment, it's the only places. It has the potential to displace the native species. So as you saw from that picture, when it comes into a new area, it grows very fast and it covers everything. So you don't get much diversity of other species there when this is there. It also has the potential to impact agriculture. We see it a lot growing over mussels. And when it gets really big, all of this red stuff here is Schizoprella japonica. And this could have 2 problems. The first, that it can actually kill the mussel because it grows so far over it that the mussel can no longer open. And the second, that it makes it very expensive for the farmers to clean the mussels before they can sell them. So it means that they're no longer marketable. They can no longer make money from them. Potentially. We haven't seen this happening yet, but this is what we are afraid of. and also impact industry such as shipping and marine renewables through fouling. And this last point is the reason why I am here and the reason I have been given money to research this species, because of its impact on the marine renewable industry. So this is just what it looks like on most of the fishing boats around our area. So all of these white patches are dead patches of Schizophila japonica after this boat has been taken from the water for a little while. So it's on most of the boats. And this is actually a picture from a tidal turbine that was in the sea for just 6 months, and all of the orange patches are Schizophila japonica. So even this tidal turbine on its own in the middle of the sea has it. So the different kinds of renewable energy devices. As I said, we're finding it growing on all kinds of things, and it mostly grows near the surface of the sea. It likes to be near the daylight, I think. And it mostly likes artificial surfaces, so it likes plastic and metal and sometimes wood, but it really likes kind of paint and all of these kind of things. All the places you don't want it to grow if you are trying to build a very expensive engineering device to put in the sea. And the different kinds of devices that we have, these are two of the devices we have found this bryozoan on. This one is called the oyster, and this is one of the main energy producing wave devices at the moment. So it has two parts, one which sits on the sea floor and one which bobs with a wave, and it has a float here. And it bobs up and down with a wave, and it drives a pump in the hinge, which pumps water to turn a turbine and generate electricity. And japonica is getting into all of these pieces, all of these places, including the joints, so it's starting to cause problems. This other one is called palamis, and it sits on the top of the sea, and it moves like a snake. So it kind of moves like this when the waves go up and down. And in each of the joints, there is a small pump that drives water and drives a turbine. But in each of these hinges, again, it is a problem when japonica gets inside, because it starts to break the engineering, it starts to abrade the mechanical surface. And one of the areas which I'm working with quite closely at the moment, this is a company called Scott Renewables, who have a tidal turbine device. So it floats at the top of the sea, so the sea floats here, and these two arms have propellers, or impellers, I should say. So when the tide comes along, it turns these propellers and generates electricity. And this device can turn depending on which way the tide is going. So it will always be facing the direction of the current water. And so far we have found japonica all the way along here, in this area here, which is a very expensive, and it goes inside here, a very expensive communications area inside the device, which helps to turn the device itself. We have found it in these joints, which move the propellers up and down, and even inside the propeller blades themselves. So it is getting into quite a lot of these. So this is the reason why I am studying this species, because these companies want to know what it is, how it breeds, and what they can do about it. So thankfully they give me some money to try and find these things out. So we've taken a few different approaches. We've known about this species since 2011, and so we've been doing little pieces since then. And only recently, in the last year, when it has started to be a problem in the renewable energy industry, has the work escalated. So we have been given some more money and we can do some more work. So it went slowly at first, but first of all we started off by identifying it. And we used both genetics and also morphology to compare it to the species from Japan, and also if this species has travelled via North America and Canada. So we also compared it to the Canadian species as well. And it's all the same stuff. So we have published that. Then we wanted to find out where it is. So how big a problem is this? So we went to over 180 different places so far to look for it, all around the UK, and also France now, and Ireland, and some places in Norway. And I said earlier about where we have found it. So we've found some in Norway, one in England, one in Wales, and mostly in Scotland. I like skeletons, so of course I started looking at the mineralogical variation when I first found this. Before it became important, I was very interested because this is a strange species, as you will see when I show you some pictures of it. So I started looking at how the skeleton varied. And also how the morphology varied, so how the actual structures within the species itself changed through the different seasons. So I've been looking at this regular time points over maybe 3 years now. And then the final piece, which we've just started to work on now, which is looking at the life history of the species, so how it reproduces and all of these kind of important factors. So I've spoken to you a little bit about the identification and distribution, so I won't speak more about that now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the first data we have from the mineralogy and the morphological variation. So first of all, this species is particularly interesting if you like skeletons, because it has both calcite and aragonite together in the same skeleton. It also has quite high concentrations of magnesium, which makes it quite interesting. And it has a few different types of crystals all throughout the skeleton. So these are the high magnesium calcite crystals, which are quite small and quite regular, and make up the bulk of the walls of the zooids within the bryozoans. Oh, there was meant to be another picture there of aragonite. I apologise. It's just a picture of aragonite. Okay, so when I looked at the variation of aragonite through the seasons, which you can see here at the bottom, this is just a small preliminary data set. I now have more data, but I'm afraid I haven't had time to add this. You can see that it goes up and down quite a lot. It varies a lot. And up here we have the temperature from the same site. So we had this being measured every hour to see how that varied. And actually, the aragonite varies quite closely with the temperature in this case. It's not exact, but it seems to explain quite a lot of the aragonite variation in this species. However, the magnesium variation doesn't follow this pattern. This may not come as a surprise to you after I showed you before. It does change through the seasons, so it does vary with seasons. And now I have seen this on another extra year of data. But it doesn't follow temperature. Actually, if we look at it this way, it's not really a relationship, but it actually looks like the magnesium decreases as the temperature goes up. So it does the opposite of what you would expect if you were to look at the paleoclimatic rule. So this was a bit strange, and I looked at this and I thought, what is going on? Is there anything else that might be explaining it? Are there any other environmental conditions? This is a bit of a basic slide here with just a couple of measurements, but the summary is no. There are no others. There's no effect of salinity, pH, alkalinity, dissolved carbon dioxide, calcite saturation, or any of these other usually, commonly measured environmental factors. So this doesn't explain the magnesium calcite variation either. So I started to look at something else. So I started to look at where the magnesium was actually found within the bryozoan itself, where it was found in the skeleton. And I used a bit of an old-fashioned technique which stains the magnesium a bright red colour in the skeleton. So it's very simple, but it hadn't really been used much for many years, but I quite like this technique. So I started looking at some specimens, And the red bits show where the magnesium is, and it's very clearly localized in these overcell structures, which is where the larvae are held before they're released. It's also found, I think, maybe I'm going to zoom in here. So these are small defensive structures called avicularia, and it's also found around the rim of these. So I thought that's quite interesting. It seems like there is actually a method as to why they put this magnesium in certain places. So then I looked at the aragonite. I'm not sure if you can see this because it's it's not very clear, but I used another stain which stains aragonite purple. And you can see that there's aragonite concentrated in these areas here, in particular, holding these overcells onto the main structures of the colony. And if we look at the front, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see here where some of it's broken, but on the very front of these zooids, the frontal shield, which we call the protective area, is again made with a layer of aragonite on the outside. And this is quite interesting because both aragonite and magnesium are harder and stronger than normal calcite. So to me, this says that they are using this because it has an improved mechanical property over normal calcite. So we found that the magnesium and the aragonite are localized in certain structures in the skeleton. So I wanted to look at how much these different structures actually vary through time and in different places. And I found that the morphology is very variable between different sites and also between different seasons. So here we are looking at these defensive structures again, these avicularia, you can see them here, these little snappy things. And at this site, there are very many of them, up to 5 different avicularia on a single individual, which is quite unusual. And it varied a lot between different sites and between different seasons. And also with the overcells. Now, this species, when I looked, turned out to be a very unusual species in the way that it breeds. Usually in bryozoans, in one individual, you have one of these overcells. So for example here, one individual and one overcell. Just like if you are a pregnant woman, you have one pregnancy bump. Only one. But this species has more than one. So you can see here, this individual actually has 2. One at the normal place and one lower down. And this has only been seen on a couple of occasions before in bryozoans. And it was recorded as a mutation, as a freak. Something very unusual, something that was probably caused by pollution or something like this. But I am seeing this consistently, again and again, almost every time I look at this species. It has these multiple overcells, and up to 5 overcells on an individual. So very many. So when we start to look at, okay, that's just zooming in. When we start to look at the frequency of these overcells and compare this to how much magnesium there is, remembering that we have found the magnesium mostly to be located in these overcells, there is a nice relationship. And I actually have a lot more data points now that make this even stronger. I just haven't had a chance to add them. So it seems that actually it's the breeding and the overcells which are determining the overall chemistry of this species rather than the temperature. So, next stage is life history analysis. This strange breeding pattern prompted this question. I presented this data, this preliminary data, at a conference in Sicily, I think 2 years ago, for some of the first data. And Andre was asking me about the life history, and I was very interested to find out some more about how it is reproducing, and in particular these multi-overcells, these strange structures. And last year we met at another conference in Poland with some of his students, and we managed to form a plan for trying to understand some more about the life history and how this animal reproduces. So within the UK we are now doing full settlement experiments full year settlement experiments. So there are panels put into the marinas in the harbours, and this bryozoan likes to come and settle on these panels. And we change them every 2 weeks to see how the settlement changes through the seasons, and this is for a full year. We also have accumulating settlement panels, where we are looking at the growth rates of the species, when it reaches sexual maturity, when the occurrence of multiple ovicells starts to occur, and the maximum age and succession of the different colonies. We're also going to be doing in January some aquarium experiments investigating how far the larvae can swim and how long they can swim for. This is very important for the renewable energy industry because they want to know how far can the larvae swim, can they get to their devices and cause a problem. And also they are very worried because they have to prove that they will not cause any problem to the natural environment also. So if they have a device in the sea, covered in my invasive species, sending larvae out into the sea, will this get into the natural environment in the shoreline and start to cause a problem? At the moment it's not in the natural environment. So these aquarium experiments are quite important to see how long the larvae could potentially live in the sea and how far they could travel. And then here, I am going to be doing sectioning of colonies to look inside and find out how many of the individuals within a colony are actively reproducing at any time, the rate of egg production within these colonies, and also whether these multi-ovicells are actually used. So whether they are a freak occurrence, a mutation, or whether they are useful. So results will hopefully be coming very soon, but at the moment, just leaves me to say thank you to people. So yeah, thanks very much everyone. Any questions?
Yes? I have a small question about how this species actually behaves back home in Japan. Like, is it?
Yeah.
Where?
I need to go to Japan next. This is what I have what I realized. Not much is known about it in Japan. It lives in the shoreline, in the intertidal shoreline. It likes the cold water best, so it does best in the cold regions, which is why it makes this a very interesting invasive species, because it is happier when it is cold. Most invasive species like the warm. This one likes the cold. But yes, it can be quite dominant in the natural environment, I think. But we need to go there and get more samples. I have been sent some samples from Japan, but they are dead, and obviously we don't know much about them. So yes, it would be good to go and find out more about it.
And is it also present in Canada?
Yes.
Is it a natural species then?
It arrived. No, it's it's an invasive species in Canada also. It arrived in Canada in the 1970s, and it was transported on oysters. So you know, the shellfish which you eat. They transported them to Canada from Japan to start to establish an oyster industry on the west coast of Canada. And on these oysters was this species. And since then, it is all over the west coast of Canada. It has made its way down into America, getting further south. We are not sure exactly how far south, because there are some problems with identification of the species over there. But it has also, in about the last 10 years, made its way to the east coast of Canada. We think by yachts, and this is where we think it's come to us from. There is a very popular route for yachts, small boats, to go from the east of Canada via Iceland and Greenland and into Scotland, this route, and then on to Norway. And we think that it is this route which has brought it to us, because it is most common in these northern marinas. But yes. I also need to go to Iceland and Greenland to prove this. So, yeah, Iceland, Greenland, Japan.
Is it causing the same kind of harm to in Iceland, Greenland, Canada, or?
It's a bit different over there. So they have a lot of problems with it on boats, and they have problems with it in the harbours and the marinas. I haven't heard of any problems in the aquaculture industry, but I don't think they have the same kinds of aquaculture industry there. And at the moment they don't have any renewable energy experiments going on. So nowhere in North America do they have wave or tidal devices in the sea at the moment. So we are the first, and we are the first ones to hit this problem. So we are trying to learn how to overcome it at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting.
It's nice to do some work which commercial has relevance to the commercial world, so they can give you some money to do it, because it's always hard to find money to do science which is interesting. And so I was almost celebrating quietly when we first found it on these wave and tidal devices, because it meant that they were now concerned and they would give us some money to find out more about it. Before then it was more difficult. We had to just research by ourselves with not much money.
Do you have other fouling types that colonize mussel shells?
Yes, lots. Yes, quite a lot of other fouling types. So lots of bryozoans, also sponges, and some sea squirts. Usually not in such large quantities though. So mostly in the mussel industry they are not too worried, because sponges and sea squirts will come off quite quickly and quite easily, and there's not usually very much bryozoans, so it doesn't concern them. They might even leave them on because it's very tiny, but this one's bigger.
What is the source of the color of this species?
I have no idea. I'm very interested in this. No idea. So if you have any ideas. It's a very strange species. It's got a few properties. We think it produces some chemicals. So for example, when I'm working with this, I get a rash, I get red up my arms. I'm allergic to this species, nothing else but this species I am. And it also, no other species will grow over the top of this. It is an effective anti-foulant. So this grows and nothing else will grow on top. Which is very interesting, because potentially if we could find out how, we could use this to stop things growing on boats. So we have sent quite a lot of this material to some colleagues in New Zealand who are trying to extract the chemicals from this species to see if there is anything that is useful that could be either used in medicine or anti-foulant or anything, because this is a little strange, this one. So maybe we will find out what the colour is there. But the interesting thing is, if you grow this in an aquarium, no colour at all. But it grows in the sea always.
And I don't quite understand why do you care about the larval dispersal range, because I mean you have such a heavy traffic in the area, so this small boat will disperse the creature all over the coastline, whatever you do.
Well, it's true, but at the moment it doesn't seem to go very far. So with tides it will be more of a problem, but at the moment in a harbour it only seems to go a few meters. So it doesn't seem to travel very far at the moment.
But the boats will distribute it.
Oh, the boats do, yes.
They will. So
yes, yes.
No matter what is the range of the larva.
No, that's true. The main thing that they are worried about is because at the moment this is not in the shoreline, in the intertidal areas. It is only on artificial substrates, so artificial environments. And for renewable energy devices, because these are the first, they have to fill out lots of paperwork to say they are not doing anything to harm the environment. And this is one of the things which they are now being asked to prove, that if they have a heavily colonized device, that they will not be contaminating the areas around. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange thing to look at. We are working with some modelers, and we have all the information on the tidal currents and the flows to see how far the larvae could get. But also in the aquariums we'll be looking at how likely the larvae would be to survive if they do travel as far. But yeah, you are right, it will be impossible to stop it completely. But if there is some evidence that these renewable devices, for example, could act as stepping stones, then they will need to use stronger anti-fouling. At the moment they don't use any anti-fouling at all, nothing, no paints to stop animals growing, because they want to be environmentally friendly, ironically. So they don't use anything. So I think that would be the only outcome we will get. They need the data for a piece of paper, but yeah, it will just help to inform their anti-fouling.
Just a comment. Yeah, we discussed it. Probably the most southern place where this species was found in California and Santa Cruz.
Yes.
So it's still like 14, 16 degrees, the water temperature, so it's quite cold. And it's probably the place where it came from Canada,
yeah.
You know, distributing along the western coast. And the second, I wonder if it lives on stones in Japan.
It does, yes.
Yeah, but why it doesn't in England or in Scotland?
Yeah.
It could be
it's
because
just
of
time, it will.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
So we have started to find, we have only found 2 or 3 small stones, but we have started to find it just under the marinas and hulls. So
and the depth distribution, that also could be interesting. You said it's living not very deep in a river.
No, it's very shallow. And it would be very interesting to learn more about why this is. The larvae are very, they move towards the light when they're released, and light is the trigger for releasing the larvae. So I don't know if this is one of the reasons why it can only live at a certain depth, because the light needs to actually reach the. I don't know.
So one of the solutions would be just to expose the devices in a certain depth, which would diminish the probability of settlement.
Yes. Yes.
For instance.
And you do see that they're only settled down to a certain depth, and then it's clean underneath. This is definitely possible for tidal devices. So some of the tidal devices are mounted from the bottom of the sea up. So, and these ones, they don't have any problems really with fouling, but they have other problems because they are more difficult and expensive to maintain. And they're in very hard environments with lots of flow, and so they're easily damaged by things like rocks and things like this. So there's no easy solution, because the ones which float on the top and drop the turbines down, they are easier to maintain and much cheaper. They just tow them back into the shore and they fix them and then they bring them back. So yeah, you're right. It would be easier if everything could be at the bottom. It would be easier because they wouldn't get fouled by this at all.
We could construct something like traps for the larvae around.
It would have to be a very fine trap. Of course, with renewable...
Just with lights. Just to give them the substrate with light, they could just take most of them. So. It
would be nice to do something like that, yeah. Of course, with renewable energy devices, this is these invasive species is the smallest problem that they have, because the biggest thing which they have to prove to get their license is that they are not injuring fish, mammals or birds, and cetaceans, whales and dolphins. So that is the main concern. This is the thing which most of the money is spent on, is making sure that they do not hurt any of these animals. And so I would love to do something with light, but I think it would probably cause the cetaceans or the birds or something to go to them and cause some problems, because, yeah, I think it would be an interesting way to do it. But I have a feeling that the solution will be to use a nasty chemical and cover everything in that. They don't want to, because again, this is not great for the environment, and actually they want these devices to be natural reefs, so they want the native species to be growing on them, to be like a reef, but yeah, I don't think it will work.
Is there any evidence that the fish or dolphins were injured by these devices or something like that?
No, not really. Fish, yes, only some, not lots. But there has been no witnessed collisions of seals or dolphins or whales or seabirds. But the problem with this question is how long do you have to watch for to prove that there is no collision happening? And how do you know if a collision has happened or not? Because it's very difficult. They are using cameras on these turbines. They are using motion detectors to try and detect vibration if something hits the turbine. They are using all kinds of things, but the sea is very turbulent. It's full of sediment. There are all kinds of other things which may hit the turbine, you know, seaweed or a bit of tree, something like this. And so it's a real challenge for people to prove that there are no collisions. But yeah, it's putting a lot of money into our zoology departments at the moment. People working on birds and mammal collisions with renewable energy. But yeah, the biggest concern is the fish, because this part of the sea is where all of the breeding salmon move. They all pass through this small part of the sea. For Norway, for Sweden, they all pass through to Iceland. And so if we are, next year we are putting 100 of these turbines in the sea, and we are, yes, a little bit worried in case this changes the migration pattern, because these are very important fish for the ecosystem, but they are also, they bring in a lot of money for all of Scandinavia and Iceland as well as Scotland. So if we start to destroy the trout or the salmon populations, I think we'll have a problem. But so far they seem to be, we have seen some collisions, but they come in and they pass through and they come out and they're very dizzy, they are confused, but they keep going. so we think it'll be okay. They are doing lots of calculations with the speed as to how fast the turbines can go and how big they have to be as well. Because if they are the right speed, then the fish and the seals can see them in time and they can avoid them.
Yeah. One more question. And have similar devices on tidal and wave energy been installed anywhere else in the world already working, or any experiments?
Not really. At the moment, Scotland is leading the world, which is really nice. Notwithstanding, we don't usually do this. It's very unusual. But at the moment, we have the most. I think we have many devices in the sea at the moment, and they have been in for up to 10 years, being tested and improved. But we also have many different companies and different types of devices. So I think we've got about 20-25 different designs of engineering devices. There are a few being tested in some other places. So in Portugal, they have a few wave devices. And also, as well as wave and tidal devices, they have offshore wind, so like wind turbines, but they are based in the sea, and some of these are floating, so they're not cemented to the bottom, and the floating ones are also getting problems with invasives. So yes, they're being tested in a few places. Portugal have some, France are doing testing in a few places. I think India has some. There's one in Ireland. I don't think North America has any yet, which is surprising, but their laws are too strict. They have not been able to put any in the sea at all. And I don't know too much about what's happening in Asia at the moment, but I know we have the most. And it's nice because they are all in one place. So the area where I'm working is actually designated as the European Test Centre for these devices. So for the whole of Europe, people bring their devices here to test them, which is why we have so many. So.
Any other questions regarding your talk? Then could you please then just say a couple of words about how you came to studying bryozoans and any other interesting and maybe unusual turns in your career?
I think I'm a bit of an unusual scientist because, yes, I have taken a bit of a circuitous route to get here. My first degree was in biochemistry and biomedical science, so more humans biochemistry. And then I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a while, working on drugs, drug development in Germany. But I didn't like it. It was very difficult to research interesting things. You could only research the things that made money. So I didn't like that so much. And I left and I decided, to be honest, if I was going to do something which was just about making money, then I would do something truly evil. And I became a banker. I worked in banking for a few years. Very different, completely different. I left science and I worked in a wore suit every day in the city in London, and did this for 5 years, but I didn't like this either. I earned lots of money, but I hated it. I was unhappy, I was bored, and so I wanted to come back to science. And so it was a big decision, but I decided to give up the money, to give up the travel and all of these things, the nice shoes, and come back to science. And I went back to university to do a master's in marine biotechnology. And this, I suppose, was thinking about my pharmaceutical background. I was interested in potential drugs and things like this that could come from the marine world. And my main reason for choosing marine was, number one, because it's not as well explored as the rest of the world. And the second reason is because I like the sea. And I thought that any job where I have to spend a lot of time next to, on or under the sea, that sounds good to me. So yeah, I chose it for that reason only. Did a master's, and it was during this master's where I first started to work on bryozoans. And again, it was accidental. I wanted to work in the polar regions. It was something that had always interested me, and I wanted to work on carbonate chemistry. So again, I suppose from my chemical side of my early training, I was very interested in carbonate chemistry. And I was talking to people at the Natural History Museum in London, trying to find someone who would take care of me and let me work with them and do some of this work. And I found somebody called Piotr Kuklinski, who works on bryozoans, and he was going to the Arctic that year. And he said, "Come with me and you can come and look at the skeletons of bryozoans." So I did, I went there, and I really liked bryozoans. I found out that they were really strange, really unusual, and especially their carbonate chemistry is weird. It doesn't do what it's meant to do. It doesn't behave. And this I found very interesting, and from my master's it resulted in a lot more questions than it answered, and my university and the Natural History Museum wanted me to continue this for a PhD because we realised that we didn't know anything, and that we needed to try and find some things out. So I was lucky that the government in Scotland at the time was giving some money for PhDs, and I managed to convince them that it was a good idea to study bryozoans and their skeletons. I don't really know how. And I did that. So yes, that was meant to only be based in Scotland, but again, I love the polar regions, so I wanted to go to Antarctica and managed to win some money to go there. So once I had won the money, then my supervisors and my university couldn't say no, so they let me go. And yeah, since then I just haven't really stopped working on bryozoans. I'm starting to, I think, diversify more now, because now I am employed on a postdoc position, and the main purpose of my postdoc is to investigate the environmental effects of renewable energy devices. So I'm lucky because one of the main things which they're interested in is bryozoans. Great. So I can still work on them. But I'm also starting to look at some other species, and especially starting to look at calcifying algae which forms reefs in Scotland, and seeing whether removing some of the current in the flow will impact these reefs at all. So, yes. So that's how I got, to where I am. A bit of a strange route, but I'm very happy that I did it this way. And it's useful for me because I have worked in different industries and I have worked in business. It's very helpful when I'm speaking to people in the renewable energy industry, or getting grants and things like this. It seems to really help because I seem to speak the same language. I kind of understand what they want, because I suppose a lot of my brain is still not programmed like a scientist. I think like a business person, maybe.
Well, thanks for giving this brief story, and unusual and interesting one. Maybe there are some questions about what Jennifer has just told us. Maybe some questions from students about studying in the UK or studying marine science in the UK. Well, if any questions appear, we can still continue with them as we are getting ready to go. And for now, I think.
And also, I'm here for another 2 weeks. So if anyone has questions that they want to come and find me.
Yes, you can find Jennifer at Invertebrate Zoology Department.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Thank
you very much for having me.